my story in a nutshell is it's back in 2006. So now it's more than 17 years ago. And I do feel this gives it the credibility to talk about healing. Because a year or two afterwards, even if I was healed, my doctors kept saying, don't, open the champagne too quickly. The kind of cancer you had can come back very quickly. And so it took many years for even them to recognize that this cancer was really healed. And still today, they won't do it publicly, but they tell me, yes, it's healed. So I was diagnosed in August 2006 with bladder cancer. It was an aggressive tumor in the bladder, 8 centimeter in size, and a sarcoma type, which is a deadly type of cancer. And at that point, it had metastasized. So I had metastase. I don't know how to say it well in English. Metastase and pretty much all over the body and on the rib cage, the spine, the hip bone, and the left lung. So about 8 to 9 metastatic spots were showing on PET scans. And because, they were mostly in the bones, there was no surgery possible. They can't, take out your bones or the bones away. So the combination of all this meant that this cancer was not only stage 4, it was incurable and inoperable. There was nothing they could do except giving me chemo. And they offered chemo after running some tests. And this is really something interesting because it was a bladder in the bladder, the main one, they could go with through biopsy, take a sample of the actual cancer tumor, the cells, and under a microscope in a lab, test the best chemotherapy or the best cocktail they had. And they came up with a response of 20%. With the best cocktail they had, 20% response means one cancer cell out of 5 was killed, meaning 4 of them growing. And my oncologist, who was very professional, submitted my case, my file, to a group of experts. It's called the tumor board. Maybe they exist in other countries, where you had 7, 8 cancer experts who double checked basically what she found and came back with the same information. Yes, that's what he has, and that's the best chemo we have. So there was no doubt there. And so at some point, I was in the hospital and she came to me, and because I had asked for her to tell me the truth, she sat down on the hospital bed and she said, this is what you have. And according to even the laboratory tests, there's really no possibility. The chemo will only prolong your life. So if you don't take chemo, you may have 3 to 6 months. She said 3 to 4 months. If you take chemo, who knows, 6, 8, maybe. So I thought, well, this is quite a choice. I mean, you know, it's a quick death or a slow agony, painful with no quality of life. And I asked her, is there any other hope? Is there any chance? Do you know of any other possibility? Like, is there at least 0.1% chance I could heal from this? And with her head, she said, no, there's no hope. She said, prepare your things, which I guess is the way they expressed, prepare yourself. And then at that moment, from within me, a little voice, and I remember hearing me saying to her, I don't believe you, I will live. As soon as I said this, I almost like listened to myself saying this, and I was shocked because I wasn't, how can I say this? I wasn't denying the scientific facts. I knew I wasn't like going crazy that, oh, they made a mistake, this is not the right thing, but somehow there was this voice in me that had this conviction, but it was a very weak voice and it expressed itself. Immediately afterwards, I was still full of doubt. How could I say that? I will die for sure. And throughout this whole process of healing that happened to me, um, this little voice manifested rarely. I say 99% of the time, I thought I would die. I had doubt. I didn't know if it would work. Okay. I'm saying this because if you're facing cancer, I don't want to give you the impression that you need to have total, absolute conviction you will heal for it to happen. At least in my case, 99% of the time, I was doubtful. I didn't know what would happen, and I was fearful, terrified of dying. Yet, that thing was there. And it turned out I asked them to give me the strongest chemotherapy that they thought I could survive. It was very toxic, a cocktail of cisplatin and other things that actually kills all your cells, basically, not very targeted. And I said, well, 20%, I'll take 20%. If you can increase the dose and give me 20 through 25, remember, I'm a physicist, so I kind of think this way. If you can give me 25, I have another 75% that's on me. What can I do with my mind? What can I do with the Buddhist practices that I've learned? At that point, I had been a student of Buddhism for 11 years. Not a very good one. I was too busy. I had a regular life with house, kids, family, car, cats, and mortgage and everything, like everyone else. So no time to practice much, but at least I had done a little bit of sitting and I knew a few practices. And I thought, well, I'm going to try to do something with my mind um, because they obviously cannot help me and they are confirming to their credit the doctors and the scientific medical establishment were very clear with me. No bullshit. They didn't promise anything. They said, we can't help you except for this little chemo. So I asked for the strongest chemo possible and went into this path of transformation, making many mistakes on the way. I did not know what to do at the beginning at all. And then when this happens to you, your friends and family and your loved ones, what do? They start sending you suggestions, recommendations on what to do, treatments they found out. This Filipino healer, for example, or Mexican healer that you could go to, or this Qigong treatment, or this pill, or this magic this and that. So I got 30 to 40 different suggestions there. Most of them were of no interest to me, but you have to figure out. And I realized I didn't have much time to do this and actually look at every possibility for healing. And my reflex at this point, because I was facing death, was to pray and pray like I never prayed. For the first time in my life, I really prayed for help and guidance about what to do. And that was the starting point. Realized that I was powerless in many ways. I could not find my own way. I had lived up to this point with a lot of ego, trying to figure out things, control myself, what was happening. Now I really needed help because this life was coming to an end, isn't it? And I feeling powerless. And help came, definitely came. And what happened, I will explain more later, through this process of not only chemotherapy, but all the stuff I did to heal within 2.5 months, actually 10 weeks, from August 9, when I got this diagnostic of cancer, up to October 26, 2006, where I got the result of the last PET scan. It turned out there was no more trace of cancer in my body in 10 weeks. So that's a very short time when you think about it. But it felt like 10 years in terms of experience for me living through this. I went through hell many times, really literally through hell in this process. But then it turned out there was no more cancer. And the oncologist who saw me doing practices when I was receiving the treatment told me, we cannot explain this. We have no explanation for such thing. But she said, it must be the power of prayers because she saw me doing, with my mala, Vajrasattva practice and other practices. At that point, I did not hide what I was doing. There was no reason I didn't care, actually. Whereas normally I'm quite discreet with these things. And she said it must be the power of prayer. In a general sense, I agree. And sometimes people come to me and they say, well, it was a miracle. I guess because of my scientific training, I have a little problem with this word miracle. I try to understand it more in a sense that it's something we don't know yet, possibly, right? Something we don't understand yet that happened. Not a miracle, and certainly not me taking credit for having miraculous powers. Not at all. Not the point here. I think, for example, if I was to go back 200 years in time, uh, and we would see these airplanes flying in the sky, it would look like a miracle, definitely be seen as a miracle by these people. Whereas today, I mean, we see this every day, and we understand why the plane flies very well. The shape of the wings and the airspeed and the lift, difference in air pressure on the wings, and just the plane goes up. It's well understood. There's no mystery, no miracle. So sometimes I wonder, maybe in some years, who knows, once we know more about mind, with the limitation that I don't think science will be able to discover everything about mind because it cannot measure mind. That's a whole other talk, basically. But maybe at some point we will know more about ourselves, how mind functions, what is the essence of mind, and it will make a lot of sense that what I did led to this result of complete healing. So as I said, um, this process of transformation uh, was very difficult, actually. It was, what can I say? Not something I would have probably voluntarily gone into. It's something I realized later I was resisting. Looking at myself, looking at the ways I was relating to myself, the wrong ways, is not something I did naturally, and I was forced to. It's as if the illness uh, asked me to crack this shell of hardness, ignorance, self hatred, even. Let me use that word, self hatred, that I had maintained throughout my life up to that point. Cancer came in that context. And it was a systematic, you could say, destruction of my shells, of my identifications and beliefs about myself. So, there, when this happens, at the end of this, it's a very painful process. At the end of this, you do realize the blessing that's behind this. But before that, very difficult because I was so attached to these identification. For example, let me just explain. When I was doing the chemotherapy, uh, well, the first treatment went pretty well, and I was a bit stupid thinking, oh, that's going to go well. People say chemotherapy is easy. I mean, they say it's very difficult, but I got the first treatment and it's okay. But it's cumulative. And so on the second treatment already, there was one a week or two a week. I was feeling pretty bad. And then it got worse from there every time, up to a point where I was lying down and going to the toilet was like climbing Mount Everest. I had no strength anymore. My body was stopping to function. And through this process, I lost everything. So from myself being, an entrepreneur, having my own company, being the president of my company, at some point you can't work anymore. So this identity goes, boom, it's gone. Then being a father, I have two children. At the time, they were teenagers. And I always saw myself as a father, and the father takes care of their children. Well, it came a point where I could not even take care of my children. And one day, um, I realized that in the strongest way possible. My daughter came to me and she said, "Would you like to walk a little bit with me?" And I said, "Yes." And she took me, and she held me, helping me to walk. And I realized, wow, I can't do anything for my children. She's the one helping me. She's the one caring for me now. So this identification of a father that I had gone. Then as a man, what a man can do. Then driving my car. I love driving my car. I couldn't. So you lose slowly, slowly, up to a point where your body is a burden. Even being a human being, what's the definition of this when your body is just a source of suffering? It is so weak, you cannot do anything. You're being fed, they have to take care of you. So slowly, slowly, debt, small loss upon small loss, I felt the abyss, the dark abyss coming towards me. That's how I felt it. I experienced losing, losing until basically it seemed like Alain was disappearing, at least the Alain I had identified with. But then what happened at some point, it got to a point where instead of the dark abyss that I thought I was being plunged into, everything became, let me use an expression, the grace of God, although it's not a Buddhist expression. Everything became extraordinary. Instead of the darkness, it was light. Instead of darkness, it was suddenly an experience, and it lasted for 3 months, where I became myself love. It's as if I was love. And I could look at everything outside, the leaves, the rocks, the trees. I could see them brilliantly. And I would be so loving that I would even, it sounds strange to say, love rocks, love cars, love houses, love people, and love myself. That experience of losing those identifications to a point where you think you disappear and suddenly you live this incredible state of mind or space, difficult to describe, uh, is, I believe, the source of healing, the source of my own healing. When I lived this experience for the better part of 3 months, uh, I believe I connected with the essence, my true nature. I connected with the actual source of healing through the basically quasi destruction of all the identification, what we call ego in a Buddhist sense, the temporary dissolution of some parts of that ego opened up this incredible potential in myself. And then the love, the unconditional acceptance that I was living moment to moment was so powerful that I would say jokingly, the cancer looked at me and said, okay, this guy understood and went to bother someone else, basically, in a nutshell. So it turned out there was a transformation. It turned out this enemy, this cancer that wanted to kill me, honestly did kill me in a sense that there's a before and after. There's an old Alain that was destroyed, that was killed, and there was a new Alain that emerged from that. So that experience lasted for 3 months. And then, as the healing was confirmed and the tests were done, and I began to regain strength, I began to eat again. I had lost like uh, 12 kilos in those 10 weeks of the whole process. Now I began to, you know, eat more and gain my strength. And the funny thing is that experience began to subside also. I was a bit less loving. I was not feeling so wonderful about the trees, the rocks, and all this, and becoming a bit more ordinary day by day. And that was quite distressing for me, to a point where I wrote a letter to Sogyal Rinpoche at the time complaining about this, that what's happening to me? I was so loving, I was so extraordinary, this state, and now I'm losing it again and becoming so ordinary. And I remember I was in a retreat at some point. He had my letter. There was 600 people there, and some of you know him, so you know how he dealt with this kind of thing. Um, he just asked me to, he said, "Where are you?" I was there, and he said, "What is this about?" And suddenly I realized, wow, I just had my life saved. I mean, I could have died from cancer, and here I am complaining again that I don't have the full experience. I mean, so I was very ashamed of saying that. And I realized my spiritual path is not over. This experience was momentary. It's an experience. But actually, maybe before the illness, my average level of happiness was here, let's say. And then through this experience of illness, of healing, I went very high in the highest spiritual experience of grace and, nature of mind and all that and love. But then it came back. But it came back here. After that, I was, in any case, on average, always happier than before, a better person. I had made some progress, but I still have a spiritual path to traverse, right? I'm not enlightened. This illness did not transform me to that point, but it showed me the potential of our essence. And that's what this path of transformation is about, is to connect with our essence, the inner nature. That's where the real source of healing is. So what we do is, yes, we do prevention, yes, we do confrontation, medication, all this, but we try as much as possible to connect with our true nature by any means possible. That's the point of this first section. Then we'll take a short break here, right? Because I think it's the right moment. And I will explain to you more specifically what is this path of healing. Let me call it this way. It's a path of healing. What does it mean? How do I connect to my true nature even when I'm sick? In a nutshell, I will share with you my understanding of that, right?